Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2 Samuel 11. So this is 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1. And it came to pass after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle. So at the end of that present year into the next, right around the time when most like campaigns or battles would begin, because the weather would be more agreeable to it. So given maybe somewhere around spring, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David tarried still at Jerusalem, so he didn't go to them or with them to that battle. And it came to pass in an eventide, or an evening tide, that David arose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman washing herself, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. So he gets up and he's taking his evening stroll on his roof, and he sees this fine shit out here, basically, showering herself with just shit. I mean, if a woman looks good, and now it's worse because you call her basically naked, right? Because she was showering herself. Anyway, says here she was beautiful to look upon, and David sent and inquired after the woman. So he basically asked, who is that? And one said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? I see right there, the second he heard that should have been it. And David sent messengers and took her, and she came in unto him, and he lay with her. For she was purified from her uncleanness, right? Being her menstrual cycle, she had been, been clean off that. So he basically sends messengers, they call her, they bring her, he entices her, and, he basically had sex with her. And she returned unto her house, and then after that, she went back home. And the woman conceived, and sent and told David, and said, I am with child. And David sent to Joab, saying, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David, because Uriah, being her husband, was with the army in the battle. So he basically calls, send Uriah back. And when Uriah was come on to him, David demanded of him how Joab did, and how the people did, and how the war prospered. So he basically asked like a report, how are things going on the battlefield? How's Joab? How's he treating you? What's going on? And David said to Uriah, go down to thy house and wash thy feet. And Uriah departed out of the king's house, and there followed him a mess of meat from the king. So David basically tells him, look, go home, rest, clean yourself, relax, chill out. And then sends a present, right? That's that mess of meat, like an assortment for Uriah. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and went not down to his house. So instead of going home, he stayed basically with the servants at the palace, at the palace entrance. And when they had told David, saying, Uriah went not down unto his house, David said unto Uriah, camest thou not from thy journey? And why then didst thou not go unto thine house? So then, that's because typically, right, from war, when you come home, you go home, you see your wife, you happy to be home. And David is saying, why haven't you gone home? Shouldn't you be excited to go back home? And Uriah said unto David, the ark and Israel and Judah abide in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go into mine house to eat and to drink and to lie down with my wife? As thou livest, and as thy soul liveth, I will not do this thing. So he's saying, like, how can I go home and be in the comfort of my home with my wife, meanwhile my fellow brethren are out there fighting in the fields, and I'm supposed to just come home and chill. Like, that's not right. I can't do that. And David said to Uriah, okay, all right. Well, tarry here today also. So why don't you go ahead and just stay here today then? And tomorrow I will let thee depart. So I'll let you go back to the battlefield tomorrow. So Uriah abode in Jerusalem that day and the morrow. Now, David, in doing this, was hoping that by having Uriah come home immediately and going to his wife in the early stage of pregnancy, where it's still not noticeable, he can lay with his wife, he can pop her, right? And then at that point, it can hide the matter. And even though the baby wouldn't have been Uriah's, it would seem like it was, right around the same time, he came back, he laid with her and so on. Okay, that's his child, end of story. Basically trying to cover it up. But Uriah being loyal and saying, nah, he can't just leave the battle like that. It's kind of putting David in a bad position, in a tough position here, right? And when David had called him, he did eat and drink before him, and he made him drunk. And at even he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his Lord, but went not down to his house. So that next day, David calls him, they basically eat, they drink, and so on. And that same night, Uriah stays there with the servants of David and still doesn't go home. And it came to pass in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter, saying, set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die. So this is basically like a death sentence that he gave to Uriah to go give to Joab. And Uriah not knowing anything of it, of course. So he basically tells him, put him in the hottest part of the battle, the most dangerous part, and then have your men fall back so that, he basically ends up dying. And it came to pass when Joab observed the city, that he assigned Uriah onto a place where he knew that valiant men were. So in looking at the city of Ammon, he's seen, all right, the toughest parts, the toughest warriors, they're on this side. So that's where he sent Uriah. And the men of the city went out and fought with Joab. And there fell some of the people of the servants of David, and Uriah the Hittite died also. So basically they set him up, and he died. Then Joab told David all the things concerning the war, and charged the messengers, saying, when thou hast made an end of telling the matters of the war unto the king. So he basically sent a report back with his messengers back to David to say, go and tell him this is how the war transpired, or this is how it's going so far. And when you finish telling him that, verse 20, and if so be that the king's wrath arise, and he say unto thee, wherefore approach ye so nigh unto the city when ye did fight? Know ye not that there would knew ye not that they would shoot from the wall? Because they were trying to take the city. They were trying to besiege it and take it. So the warriors will come out and fight against them. And then David here is saying, well, why would you get so close to their walls? Didn't you know that they have archers and so on there that would shoot at you? Who smote Abimelech, the son of Jerubesheth? Did not a woman cast a piece of a millstone upon him from the wall, that he died in Thebes or Thebes? Thebes sounds good. Now, this was going back to the time of the book of Judges, right? And you can read about this account over there. Indeed, that is how this individual died. Now, David is saying, don't you remember that story? How do you think he died? So you would know, kind of like common sense almost, right? That's not a good tactic to use, in a situation like that. So Joab is saying, if David responds this way to you, right, and says, and he gets angry and says, why went ye nigh the wall? Then say thou, then you tell him, thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. And that would basically calm David down, because he would understand, oh, this was sort of like a part of the plan that he set with Joab to to take out Uriah. So the messengers went and came and shewed David all that Joab had sent him for. And the messenger said unto David, Surely the men prevailed against us, and came out unto us into the field, and we were upon them, even unto the entering of the gate. So they came out, we fought with them, and kept putting the pressure on them, even to the entrance of their city. And the shooters shot from off the wall upon thy servants, and some of the king's servants be dead, meaning his warriors, and thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Then David said unto the messenger, Thus shalt thou say unto Joab, Let not this thing displease thee, for the sword devoureth one as well as another. So basically, this is a part of war, right? You lose some, you win some. Make thy battle more strong against the city and overthrow it, and encourage thou him. So basically, don't let this stress you out. It happens, but just next time, make sure you take that city, so basically encourage him. And when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah her husband was dead, she mourned for her husband. And when the mourning was past, David sent and fetched her to his house, and she became his wife, and bare him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord Yahweh. And indeed, it was a very, very wicked thing that David did. Very, very, very wicked. And I pulled up here because I remember I'd read at one point in the book of Josephus, right? Because he also goes into this account with a bit more detail, and it's kind of sad, right? The actual incident with all the extra details in there, because considering Uriah, right, which would seem to have been an innocent man, and being loyal, right, to his people and so on and so forth, ends up having to suffer this fate, right? Not only do you commit adultery with his wife, then you set him up to be put to death, but it's in also the way that he ends up dying. That's also pretty sad. But I'll read this very briefly. So this is a part from the Antiquities of the Jews, right, by Josephus. It says, But David fell now into a grievous sin, or into a very grievous sin, though he were otherwise naturally a righteous and a religious man, and one that firmly observed the laws of our fathers. For when late in an evening he took a view round him from the roof of his royal palace, where he used to walk at that hour, he saw a woman washing herself in her own house. She was one of extraordinary beauty, and therein surpassed all other women. Her name was Bathsheba. So he was overcome by that woman's beauty, and was not able to restrain his desires, but sent for her and lay with her. Hereupon she conceived with child, and sent to the king, that he would contrive some way for concealing her sin. So finding some way to cover it up, because this is a big deal. For according to the laws of their fathers, she who had been guilty of adultery ought to be put to death. So the king sent for Joab's armor bearer from the siege, who was the woman's husband, and his name was Uriah. And when he was come, the king inquired of him about the army and about the siege. And when he had made answer that all their affairs went according to their wishes, the king took some portions of meat from his supper, and gave them to him, and bade him go home to his wife, and take his rest with her. So go with your wife, go lay with her, and so on. Uriah did not do so, but slept near the king with the rest of his armor bearers. When the king was informed of this, he asked him why he did not go home to his house and to his wife after so long an absence, which is the natural custom of all men when they come from a long journey. He replied that it was not right, while his fellow soldiers and the general of the army slept upon the ground in the camp and in an enemy's country, that he should go and take his rest and solace himself with his wife. So when he had thus replied, the king ordered him to stay there that night, that he might dismiss him the next day, to the general to send him back basically to the battlefield. So the king invited Uriah to supper, and after a cunning and dexterous manlier plied him with drink at supper, till he was thereby disordered. Yet did he nevertheless sleep at the king's gate, without any inclination to go to his wife. Upon this the king was very angry at him, and wrote to Joab, and commanded, because he was hoping if he got him super drunk, you know, he might just give in and go home. But he didn't. And so David got pissed. Like, damn, this guy, you know, this is not good. I need to find a way around this to cover this up. He says, and wrote to Joab and commanded him to punish Uriah, for he told him that he had offended him. And he suggested to him that the manner in which he would have him punished, that it might not be discovered that he was himself the author of his punishment. So he basically told Uriah, right, according to Josephus in that letter, this guy told Joab that Uriah offended him, and so he wanted him to be punished, you know, i.e. be put to death in war, but he didn't want anybody to find out that David was behind it. It says, for he charged him to set him over against the part of the enemy's army where the attack would be most hazardous and where he might be deserted. So the plan was, you know, place Uriah at a place that's most dangerous and where you can basically leave him there and be in the greatest jeopardy. For he bade him order his fellow soldiers to retire out of the fight. So when they go, put him in the hottest parts, and then have his men, or have the other soldiers basically abandon him. When he had written thus to him and sealed the letter with his own seal, he gave it to Uriah to carry to Joab. When Joab had received it, and upon reading it understood the king's purpose, he set Uriah in that place where he knew the enemy would be most troublesome to them, and gave him for his partners some of the best soldiers in the army, and said that he would also come to their assistance with the with the whole army, that if possible they might break down some part of the wall and enter the city. So he basically said, look, I'm gonna give you some of the best soldiers. You go up in there, and if you guys need help, I'll bring the whole army, and we can make a breach in this wall and take it over. And he desired him to be glad of the opportunity of exposing himself to such great pains, and not to be displeased at it. So then he basically tried to encourage Uriah, like, yo, this is a good opportunity for you to, you know, really fight for Israel and help us take the Ammonite city. Since he was a valiant soldier and had a great reputation for his valor, right, this being Uriah, both with the king and with his countrymen. And when Uriah undertook the work, he was set upon with alacrity meaning like excitement, and like, you know, he was ready. He gave private orders to those who were to be his companions, that is Joab. Joab ended up giving private orders to the men that were supposed to go with Uriah, that when they saw the enemy make a sally, they should leave him. When therefore the Hebrews made an attack upon the city, the Ammonites were afraid that the enemy might prevent them and get up into the city, and this at the very place whither Uriah was ordered. So they exposed their best soldiers to be in the forefront, and opened their gates suddenly, and fell upon the enemy with great vehemency, and ran violently upon them. So they let out their best soldiers basically to try and slay anybody at the entrance to prevent them from coming into the city. This is what the Ammonites did. When those that were with Uriah saw this, they all retreated backward, as Joab had directed them beforehand. But Uriah, as ashamed to run away and leave his post, sustained the enemy, and receiving the violence of their onset, he slew many of them, but being encompassed around and caught in the midst of them, he was slain, and some other of his companions were slain with him. And so basically, the setting the scene, right, as they got they got closer and closer, the Ammonites basically rushed upon them. Those that Joab had instructed ended up abandoning Uriah, but knowing that Uriah was a valiant man, he couldn't abandon his post, so he stayed to fight. And he did his best, right, to fend them off and kill as much as he could. But he ended up being surrounded, and then eventually they killed him, basically in battle, and the few that had stayed with him. So, there were, a bit more details in there, right, on like, how he died and so on and so forth. But you can see indeed why it said that this displeased the Lord. Because truly this was a very wicked thing that King David had done. Though he was a man after the Lord's heart and though he was righteous, he did, commit a great iniquity that day by doing this. And that brings us to the end of the book of 2 Samuel, the 11th chapter. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Ruach HaKodesh. Until next time, Shalom.